I'm actually a forum writer for the newspaper which I go to school with, CCAC South Campus. I'm a writer for that. And I did my list of the top 10 teams that won the Super Bowl. And the article I turned in on Monday, and I thought about it. I'm not going to give you any of the rankings from that list. All I'm going to say is that my list is different now. I went through and changed some things, reworked a few spots, and I want you guys to enjoy what I have to put out. There's a team I considered putting on this list. It was the 1991 Washington Redskins that were first in the league in offense and second in the league in defense in terms of scoring, and blasted all their playoff opponents. You can make an argument for them in the top 10, but I felt there were more complete teams out there to put up there, and teams with more, more star, more legendary players. I mean, come on, he had a choice of putting a quarterback, Mark Rippon, on the list, who had one great year in '91 and won the Super Bowl MVP award, but other than that, never amounted to shit. Or you could put a team on the list that had a lot of star power over a long period of time. While the team itself, the 91 Redskins, may not make the list, coming in at number 7 is the franchise that beat them in the playoffs the season prior. Number 7 on the list of the greatest teams to win the Super Bowl, the 1984 San Francisco 49ers. This was the first truly dominant year that they had, the first really good one. Second in the league at 29.7 points a game, first in the league in 14.2 points per game allowed. Plus 16 turnover differential, 10th in yards allowed, second in terms of points and yards offensively, and they were a very complete team. They really were a very, very complete team. You had quarterback Joe Montana, who many will argue is the greatest of all time. I won't get into that debate here. You had running back Wendell Tyler, Pro Bowler. You had legendary players in that roster. The 1,000 guy the next season, Roger Craig. You had wide receiver Dwight Clark, recipient of the catch that beat the Cowboys in the '81 title game. And on defense, you had cornerbacks Ronnie Lott and Eric Wright, Pro Bowlers. You had free safety Dwight Hicks, Pro Bowler. You had star power everywhere on this team. And when this team got into the playoffs, they were an incredibly scary team to go against. They outscored their opponents in the playoffs 82 to 26. So they won each of their games by an average score of 27 to 9. One of the most dominant postseason teams in league history. They finished the regular season 15-1. The only loss coming in Week 7 at home to my Pittsburgh Steelers. And honestly, that's a game that the refs gave to the Pittsburgh Steelers. It is. Because at the end of that game, there was a pass interference call against the Niners that shouldn't have been called on a 4th down that allowed the Steelers to get a 1st and goal and eventually seal the win a few minutes later. What the Niners in those days in the 80s and early 90s were not noted for was something that I think a lot of teams today should be able to copy. They're a team that would put up, there'd be a 70 to 30 pass run ratio for the first 3 quarters. And then in the 4th quarter, they'd run the ball like almost every down. Bill Walsh always said, you pass to get the lead, you run to seal the win. And that team that year, the 84 Niners, they only failed to reach 100 yards in 2 games. Cincy and LA Rams are the only 2 teams to keep them at under 100 yards rushing. Very impressive unit that they had. And in the Super Bowl against the MVP Marino and the Miami Dolphins, one of the most prolific offenses in league history, shut them down and held them to 16 points and had 2 picks of Marino in the game. Miami only had 19 first downs and 25 yards rushing. Sacked 4 times by the Niners defense. Marino never knew what was going on, and he never got back to a Super Bowl. Montana, fine game. 3 touchdowns, and that would be the difference in that game. Up next in the list, one of my all-time favorite teams. One of the most underrated of all the Super Bowl championship teams. Number 6, the 1975 Pittsburgh Steelers. This roster was completely loaded from top to bottom. A lot of people say, free agency nowadays, it's hard. You know what? Who you have on the roster is who you have on the roster, okay? And the 75 Steelers, like the 78 team that you'll hear about later, dominant team. If you look at the talent this team had, you had Terry Bradshaw, Franco Harris, Lynn Swann, John Stallworth, Mike Webster, Joe Green, Jack Ham, Jack Lambert, Mel Blount. All those guys I named are Hall of Famers. Literally, 9 of the 22 starting players on the Steelers 1975 team are in the Hall of Fame. A couple of times where backups hadn't seen the field much, like Webster and Stallworth. But the way that unit played that year, the whole team itself was just unbelievably talented. 26.6 points per game, 5th in the league. 11.6 points per game allowed, 2nd. Margin of 15 points a game. What a lot of people forget about the Steelers is they had incredibly high turnover differentials even when they committed to a lot of turnovers. 37 turnovers they forced. And you had Mel Blount, who had 11 interceptions, Defensive Player of the Year. One of the best cornerback for my money in league history as a tackler and interceptor of the football. And he was fast and he was big. What a team that was. They got in the playoffs. They didn't play their best football, but it was still more than enough to beat some of the best teams in league history. The mid-70s Baltimore Colts, they beat 28-10, and the Raiders of the 70s, who had some of the greatest teams in league history, they beat them 16-10. And in one of the best games in Super Bowl history, and one of the honorable mentions on my countdown on Monday, they beat the Dallas Cowboys in Super Bowl 10 in Miami 21-17. What makes the Steelers so great? Simple. A top 5 offense and the best defense in the league. I did my list last night of the top 10 defenses in league history. I had the Steelers of the 70s at number 1. Do you think I'm honestly going to change that in one night? No. Easily the best defense in league history. They were the best defense every year in the league. Maybe not statistically, but in people's minds, you knew that they were for about an 8 or 9 year period. That is a streak that cannot be matched in the annals of NFL history. And makes the Steelers of the 75 more than deserving to be on the list. Anytime the Steelers in the 70s needed a clutch play, they'd get it. And that's why. That's exactly the reason why they're on this list. Alrighty then. Halfway through our list, let's count down numbers 10 through 6. Number 10, 76 Raiders. 9, 99 Rams. 8, 92 Cowboys. 7, 84 49ers. And 6, the 75 Steelers. Moving right along. The number 5 greatest Super Bowl winning team of all time. The only team pre-merger to appear on this list. The 1966 Green Bay Packers. Winners of Super Bowl I. The only team in league history that can match the Steelers of the 70s in terms of Hall of Fame power. They have 11 Hall of Famers counting head coach Vince Lombardi. And that year they went 4th when scoring offense, 335 points, and 1st in fewest points allowed, giving up only 11.6 per game. 23.9 they scored per game. Vince Lombardi's Packers were always known for being a disciplined team. And that year was very good evidence of it. They allowed they forced 6 of their opponents into point totals less than 10. Fewer points in those games. Sorry, I just lost my chain of thoughts there. Yeah, 6 teams failed to score 10 points on this team, and only 5 was able to reach 20. And the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl 1, they pounded the AFL champion Chiefs 35-10. You had Bart Starr, all-pro quarterback, 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And you had the defense. You had cornerback Herb Adderley with 4 picks, linebacker Leroy Caffey, 3, safety Willie Wood with 3. You had linebacker Ray Nitschke, who's an first-team All-NFL, one of the greatest linebackers in league history. That year, they would just pride themselves on just stopping people and just run the football. The Packers, they may have been a run-first team, but that year they ranked higher in their passing offense and their rushing offense, as Starr threw for 2,257 yards. Now, 161 yards a game may not seem like much, but you have to understand that there were games where the Packers didn't need to throw. But when they did, they always came through. Alright, I'm going to take another break. Coming back, numbers 4 through 2, and plenty of controversy. Just the way I like it.